It should be ready. You guys can start.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Primate Conversations at the University of Oxford. And we are very delighted today to be hosting Professor Inza Koné. Professor Koné is a full professor for conservation biology, and he's currently the Director General at the Centre Suisse de Recherche Scientifique in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Professor Koné has been doing a lot of very important work linking ecology, economy, and the culture to empower rural communities in Ivory Coast and in other countries in Africa with the goal of conserving primates and different primate species. And this work has led to a lot of publications, but also a lot of honors. Professor Koné is the commander of the Order of Merit for National Education in Côte d'Ivoire, and he was recently awarded the Special Presidential Award for the International Primatological Society. And today, Professor Koné will be talking about community empowerment for the conservation of endangered primates in Côte d'Ivoire, the role of transdisciplinary research. And with that, I would like to welcome Professor Koné and will hand over to him. And you're muted currently. Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Thank you again. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experience with the primate community of the University of Oxford. And as you say, the presentation will be about the role of transdisciplinary research in the community empowerment process for the conservation of endangered primates in Côte d'Ivoire. The presentation will be structured around 5 different points. I'll make a short introduction, and then I'll say a few words about the conservation status of primates in Côte d'Ivoire, and I'll talk about the Tanwe A Forest Community-Based Conservation Project. This is the main tenet of this presentation. I'll say a few words about the project outcomes, and I will end with the role of transdisciplinary research on everything we've been doing so far. Côte d'Ivoire is located in the middle of the Upper Guinean Biodiversity Hotspot, which comprises all the coastal forests of West Africa. With this presentation, with this, I would say, geographic location of Côte d'Ivoire in the Upper Guinean Biodiversity Hotspot, Côte d'Ivoire has a high concentration of biodiversity, and this is particularly true for primates. Upper Guinean biodiversity hotspots may be subdivided into Upper Guinean East and Upper Guinean West, with different realities and with different sets of primate species. In Côte d'Ivoire, we can have up to 22 primate species, including 4 critically endangered species, 5 endangered species, 3 vulnerable species, 5 near-threatened species, and 5 least concerned species. So clearly, most primates of Côte d'Ivoire are threatened with extinction. And the situation differs significantly whether you are at Western Côte d'Ivoire or Eastern Côte d'Ivoire. Western Côte d'Ivoire is characterized by the persistence of large forest blocks like the Tai National Park, which is the largest primary evergreen forest under protection in West Africa. It's also characterized, Western Côte d'Ivoire, by the presence of long-term primate research projects like the Tai Chimpanzee Project, which has more than 40 years of existence, and the Tai Monkey Project, more than 30 years of existence. Western Côte d'Ivoire is also characterized by the existence of important conservation projects with most big international NGOs and bilateral cooperation like the German cooperation. To the contrary, Eastern Côte d'Ivoire is characterized by exacerbated threats to primates and their habitat. It is in this part of the country that you find the biggest cities, including the capital, Abidjan. It is in this part that you find the largest plantations of alpine, cocoa, rubber trees, and so on. And this part of the country has been characterized by a lack of interest from primate conservationists and researchers until recently. Primate habitat is threatened in Côte d'Ivoire and has always been threatened in Côte d'Ivoire. The country has one of the highest deforestation rates in the world. Since gaining independence in 1960, the country lost up to 90% of its forest cover. In the period 1990 and 2000, we used to lose up to 500,000 hectares per year. And in the period 2000 and 2015, we are losing up to 100,000 hectares per year, not as a result of conservation measures, but just because there's nothing left to be destroyed. Forest fragmentation is widespread throughout the country. This picture shows, for instance, the deforestation rates in these two periods between 1990 and 2000, and then between 2000 and 2015. As you can see, there's almost nothing left to be destroyed. And as I was saying, forest fragmentation is widespread throughout the country. In the 60s, you want to find continuums of forests when you travel over a large distance. This is something that you cannot experience anymore. The only remaining forests are of small size, generally less than 10 hectares. So if you found forests of more than 100 hectares, is, I would say, a kind of miracle. What are the drivers of deforestation in Côte d'Ivoire? This slide is in French, but it's simple. We have the direct threats and we have the indirect threats. The direct drivers of deforestation in Côte d'Ivoire are the agricultural expansion, so like for cocoa, rubber trees, and oil palm, and followed by logging and infrastructure development, and finally mining, for instance. As per the indirect drivers of deforestation, economic factors rank first, followed by political factors like political instabilities, corruptions, and so on, followed by demographic factors, and finally, technological factors. Primates are threatened in Côte d'Ivoire as a consequence of deforestation and overhunting. And as a result of this, we observe dwindling primate fauna throughout the country. In the 90s, in less than 20 years, we lost 90% of the chimpanzee population size. And several other primate species have been exterminated from most forest areas of their historical range. The best illustration for this is the case of Miss Wadron's red colobus. This species is critically endangered and even probably extinct. The last time it's been observed in the wild was in 1978 in Ghana. The monkey used to occur in, I would say, the eastern part of Côte d'Ivoire and the western part of Ghana, but today it's been exterminated from most forest areas of this historical range. It is only in one forest that we still have the hope for rediscovering this species. As a reaction of the Primate Specialist Group in 1986, an action plan, an African Primate Action Plan, was elaborated and recommended that investigations are made in southeastern and south central Côte d'Ivoire to identify top priority sites for primate conservation and to study the faunal transition around the Sassandra River. 10 years after these recommendations, only a national inventory of chimpanzees was conducted by Hoppe Dominic, which shows a lack of interest for the area, a persistent lack of interest for the area. Then, in a revised version of a Primate Action Plan, it was recommended to follow the recommendations of the former plan, especially surveys to find the rollaway guinon, the white-napped mangabe, and Miss Waldron's red corals. 10 years later, a series of surveys were conducted by Megro and collaborators in the late 90s, and they recommended to upgrade the status of the protected forest of Eastern Côte d'Ivoire. They found some classified forests that looked very interesting, where you could still find the rollaway guinon and even the white-napped mangabe. But they were not confident because the protection status of these forests were relatively weak. And they were even more pessimistic about the fate of the non-protected forests located in the extreme southeast of the country. Then following these, I would say, pioneering surveys, my team initiated a series of surveys since 2004. And then we gave birth to the RANDAPSI program, standing for Research and Action for the Protection of Primates in Côte d'Ivoire. This is the first long-term primate conservation research and conservation program in southeastern Côte d'Ivoire. I said in the beginning that most conservation projects, most long-term conservation projects are focused in the Thai National Park, which is in Western Côte d'Ivoire. So the first axis of the RANDAPSI program is to update the conservation status of primates in South Central and Southeastern Côte d'Ivoire. So between 2004 and 2014, we investigated up to 10 sites in South Central Côte d'Ivoire and 8 different sites in Southeastern Côte d'Ivoire. So I mentioned here the Sassandra River and the Bandama River, which play important roles in terms of speciation and in terms of different realities. The main findings of all these surveys confirmed that habitat destruction was indeed widespread. So this is an image of a plantation inside a protected area, the Marawe National Park. This image is also in the same national park where you have a recent agricultural clearance in 2004. And you have here a sign of chainsaw mining in the Tanwe A forest in the southeastern corner of Côte d'Ivoire. As for poaching, you have here a picture of duiker being smoked at the periphery of the Marawe National Park. And here, a carcass of white-napped mangabe, a critically endangered primate that we found close to the Azani National Park in South Central Côte d'Ivoire. And here, that was our first sighting of the green monkey in the forest zone of Côte d'Ivoire. The green monkey is supposed to be a savanna monkey, but we found this carcass close to the Eotile Island National Park, which is in the forest zone of Côte d'Ivoire, which is unique. We've been studying this monkey since then with different students. Even one PhD student is working on this species in the Eotile Island National Park. This was our first sighting of this monkey in southern Côte d'Ivoire. It was a carcass. This surveys that we made also enabled to confirm the primate conservation status in general in all the forests that we surveyed. We focused on the white-napped mangabe, the rollaway guinon, and Miss Waldron's red colobus, and finally we included the white-tailed colobus. When we were starting this study, this monkey used to be classified as vulnerable, but today the white-tailed colobus is classified as critically endangered. So we found the white-napped mangabe only in the Dasioko forest and in the Tanwe A forest. So Dasioko forest for central Cote d'Ivoire and Tanwe A forest for southeastern Cote d'Ivoire. And we found a role of a guinon only in southeastern Cote d'Ivoire in the Tanwe A forest. We had calls of Miss Waldron's red colobus only in the Tanwe A forest. That was in 2008. Since then, we haven't managed to spot the monkey. And the white tag colobus was found in the Dinaudi Sacred Grove in south central Cote d'Ivoire and in the Tanwe A forest in southeastern Cote d'Ivoire. So the Tanwe A forest is now considered as a very important forest. It houses up to 9 primate species, including 3 critically endangered species, 1 endangered species, and 2 vulnerable species, 2 near-threatened species, and 1 least concerned species, which means that 8 out of 9 of the primates of the Tanwe A forest are threatened. The Tanwe A forest is also an ecological refuge. This is the only forest remaining in the extreme southeast of Cote d'Ivoire. You can see on this satellite image that the forest is surrounded by oil palm plantations. For this reason, we considered the Tanwe A forest as a top priority site for private conservation in West Africa. This is the only forest east of the Sassandra River where more than 2 endangered monkey species have survived. The only forest in Cote d'Ivoire where the rollaway guinon may be found. In this forest, all the primate species are of conservation concern. I talked about 8 out of 9. And this is the only forest where the presence of Miss Waldron's red colobus is still suspected. Nonetheless, the Tanwe A forest is threatened with poaching, with logging. So a sign of poaching is this carcass of Miss Waldron's red colobus. The story of this carcass is that when Scott Magro and collaborators made the first surveys in this area, poachers used to say that the monkey was still there, but he doubted because after several days of survey, they didn't find any sign of the presence of the monkey. And then when he returned back to the USA, one of the poachers was frustrated and he decided to kill one monkey to show Scott Magro that the monkey was still there. And he sent this picture to Scott Magro, who published it in IGP to say that the hope for rediscovering Miss Waldron's red colobus was revived. The other threats are logging, chainsaw mining, small-scale agricultural clearings, and oil palm projects. So in this region, like you saw on the satellite image, you have one of the largest plantation of oil palm in the world. As a conservation response, considering the biological, the ecological, and socioeconomic value of the Tanwe A forest, considering the threats to this forest, we initiated a community-based conservation project since September 2006. This project aims to conserve 4 of the most endangered primates of Africa and other sympatric species. These monkeys and their historical distribution range had not been the focus of any conservation project before us. The project is an example of how communities can play major roles in conservation activities combined with local development. So the 4 primate species we focus on are the rollaway guinon, the white napped mangabe, the white tail colobus, and Miss Waldron's red colobus. Why a community-based approach for such an important forest? Simply because we also observe that in Cote d'Ivoire, despite important conservation measures I would say, conservation policies are failing. And this is partly due to the exclusion of local communities. We observe the failure because the deforestation rate is still very high. We can observe the devastating effects of deforestation and illegal hunting on wildlife. And we can also observe that communities near forest areas are getting poorer and poorer. First, Koné has been adjusting its conservation policies, and now the emphasis is put on community empowerment. To come back to our Tanwe A Forest Community-Based Conservation Project, this project has 6 different components. The first component is multi and transdisciplinary research. We are, above all, a research center. So we start with research in different disciplines, many disciplines of zoology. So we work on primates, we work on other large mammals, on fishes, birds, rodents, amphibians, otters, and we also do some genetic studies. We also involve botanists and anthropologists, social scientists, and also economists in various studies. The second component is awareness raising. Here, we multiply approaches to reach the maximum of persons, to sensitize the maximum of persons, and to change behavior in the area. So we can do theater performances, video sessions, group discussion, public events like football match, for instance, and we also use signboards, t-shirts, all communication tools to reach the maximum targets. The third component is community organization and capacity building. So here we build the capacities of local communities in terms of logistic and financial support, and we organize several trainings for farmers, for women, for eco-guards, recruited among community members, and we also form several students. Several PhD have been defended from this forest, and several master's studies as well. The fourth component is surveillance. So we organize joint patrols with governmental rangers. I mean, community members together with governmental rangers do patrols. And sometimes we do that with Ghanaian stakeholders, which we haven't been able to do since COVID-19. And we also organize independent patrols just by community members. And we also do biomonitoring. The fifth component is support to the forest designation process. So we've been working with communities to do the forest demarcation with an official geometrician. And we organized several meetings of the Forest Designation Committee that has been established by the Minister of Environment. And we finally compiled the application material for the forest to be designated as a community reserve. And the last component of the project is support to local development. So we've been working to improve access to safe water and to also improve the working conditions for teachers and school kids. And we promoted alternative livelihoods through agroforestry and through farming. Some selected highlights of the project. We've been observing the principles of good governance, because these principles are 6 as far as forest governance is concerned. The first principle is define membership and geographic area. So the forest has been demarcated. We know all the neighboring villages. We know those who are part of the project. And this is clear and non-debatable. So today we have 11 different villages involved in the project. The second principle of good governance is legitimate and recognized structures. So at village level, we have created, we push communities actually to create conservation-focused associations at village level. So in each of the 11 villages, and this has been following the rules in Côte d'Ivoire in this field. And these villages belong to 3 different districts. So at district level, you have similar realities, which differ from one district to the other one. So at district level, we have created a paramount association coordinating the activities of the village-based association that are the operation bodies. And at the federal level, these district paramount associations are, I would say, meet inside one federation. And it is the federation that will be playing the role of supervision and that will be playing the role of interlocutors with different partners, including ourselves as a research center, but also the national administration. The third principle of good governance is institutional mechanism to enable decisions. So this is something clear, how decisions are made from the supervision body, the federation, to the coordinating one, and to the operational one in the field at village level. The fourth principle is devolving responsibility and rights. So communities should be at the front line of conservation action. And they can do that. They've been successful in doing that. They have all the rights on this forest. We didn't try to make it a national park. We are making it a community reserve. And the fifth principle of good governance is long-term sustainability. Here, we diversify partnership. We focus a lot on capacity building and so on. And we explore innovative funding mechanism. One other highlight is the activism that we demonstrated in 2008, 2009, when a big oil palm company wanted to destroy the Tanway forest to create an oil palm plantation. So this activism has been international, local, and national, and it's been successful. And more recently, there is a typo here, we managed to stop an artisanal gold mining project at the periphery of the Tanway forest. We've been developing synergy with Ghanaian stakeholders. As you can see, the Tanway forest represents the border between Cote-d'Ivoire and Ghana in this part of the country. On this picture, for instance, we are standing here in Ghana, and at the other side of the river, you can see the Tanway forest. And this is the signboard of the Tanway forest. So which means that people can cross easily on a boat to go inside the Tanway forest, kill animals or cut trees and come back to Ghana. So we observe even a boat when we're standing there, a boat coming from the Tanway forest and full with planks. Other highlights is that we have a kind of national and international recognition of our work. And this has been documented in a book produced by IUCN Papako, so West and Central Africa, after our attendance to, I would say, the latest Work Park Congress in Sydney, together with other African champions. And these 22 champions have written their story in this book, and the Tanway forest is mentioned in it. We have also been highlighted by the Panorama initiative of IUCN. So this is the link to our solution for a healthy planet. And we received several international awards, including the Future for Nature Awards in the Netherlands, the Whitley for Nature Award in the UK, the Hermitage Foundation Award in Switzerland and Cote d'Ivoire, and finally, the National Award for Excellence in Research in Cote d'Ivoire. Some outcomes of this project. Today, we can demonstrate, I would say, reduced intensity of poaching as compared to the beginning of the project. We can also demonstrate a reduced intensity of chainsaw mining, and we can say that we've been able to avoid the loss of 12,000 hectares of high conservation value forest. Through this, we can say that we've been able to disable a carbon bomb because this is a swampy forest, and a swampy forest stocks large amounts of carbon. And we've been able to preserve the plant and wild animal diversity in this region, as well as ecosystem services. Recently, we've been able to complete the forest designation process. So I would say 2021, because it is in December 2021 that the forest was officially designated as a community reserve, which is something we are particularly proud of. And we can observe that wildlife is thriving. We can observe the monkeys in all areas of the forest and also at the periphery. Like on this picture, monkeys are more and more found at the periphery, which is source maybe for a new problem, human-wildlife conflict, but this is much better than losing this species. Other outcomes of the project are the number of local persons that are skilled in the project area. Capacity building is critical to sustainability. So whether for conservation, for smart agriculture, for forest management, and for awareness raising campaign, communities are skilled today to do things independently. We still coach them, of course, for better results, but we have a critical mass of people, of local people that can do the work efficiently. And awareness has been raised among community members. In all villages, we have a critical mass of persons who can discuss about the issues of sustainable development with anybody. They've understood the principle, the implication of sustainable development, and they can go in this direction with conviction. What makes it work? First of all, enabling factors. We focus a lot on the rehabilitation of traditional knowledges and values in a modern context. On this picture, for instance, we are observing a ritual to a sacred river to ask for permission to enter into the forest to look for the monkeys. We missed to do that in the beginning when we were searching for Miss Waldron's red colobus. We entered in the forest with some community members, and after 10 days, we came back for a break, and we heard people murmuring that these people think that they can see this monkey if they don't do the ritual, they will never find it. And as we heard that, we decided to observe a ritual, and then we went back in the forest. And believe me or not, the first day when we went back in the forest, we heard calls of Miss Waldron red colobus. That was in 2008. Another enabling factor is the patience that we have to observe. You have to be patient and flexible when you work with communities. You cannot come and just say you want to achieve this result in 6 months, in 1 year. It doesn't work like this with communities. You have to be patient. You have to take your time. This is difficult because donors will not give you the time that you need to make a result. But you have to be flexible. You have to convince your donors that moving forward slowly is the best way to achieve your result. And you need to develop long-term core funding mechanisms. Yeah, because as I said, most donors will not be supporting you over the long term, but you need to find some donors, some partners that will be engaged with you over the long term. And this is our case through WAPCA, the West African Primate Conservation Action, through the Mulhouse Zoo, for instance, through the association, the French Association of Zoos and Aquaria. These partners have been with us for more than 10 years now. And this is very important. From their core funding, we can raise additional funds to make the difference. And we are now, I would say, partnering with new institutions like Aquapris in the Netherlands that we think here. The components that lead to success, for us, it is research. We are not the first initiative of this kind in West Africa, but we are one of the most successful one. And our secret is that research feeds action and vice versa in an iterative process. What is the role of research? Research enables us to highlight the conservation value of a forest. First of all, the biological dimension of this conservation value. We have a clear idea of the diversity of the forest in terms of mammals, birds, fishes, amphibians, and plants. We have a good idea of the carbon stock in this forest, and we have a good knowledge of ecology and diversity of fishes and primates in this forest. To give you some illustration of this, we know that we have 9 primate species in the forest, 8 of which are of conservation concern. We have more than 274 species of birds, including 12 of conservation concern, more than 38 amphibian species, 10 of which are of conservation concern, 22 fishes species, including 2 of conservation concern, and almost 300 plant species, including 33 of conservation concern. The other dimension of the conservation value of a forest is the socioeconomic dimension. And here we have a good understanding of the forest perception and use by local communities. We have a good understanding of the socio-cultural drivers of communities' commitment for conservation, which is very important if you target sustainability. We have a good idea of the cost and benefits of conservation in this area. Regarding the daily uses of forest resources, these forest resources are used for medicinal plants, like you can see on this picture, medicinal plants being sold in one of the villages, and they are also used for food. So fishery is one of the most important economic activities in this region. Forest resources are also used for firewood. So in rural area and Africa in general, firewood is the principal source of energy. That has to be noted. Forest resources are also used for construction. Like here, we have a village that is inundated, I would say, once per year. So they adopted this kind of architecture to increase their resilience to this phenomenon. And all the materials in these houses are made of forest resources. Forest resources are also used for manufacturing, like here, this canoe and other, I would say, tools that are used for important economic activities that are made from forest resources. But also important cultural practices. I talked about these rituals above. One of them is linked to the white-tailed colobus. The skirt of this white-tailed colobus is used for important rituals when, for instance, a woman gives birth to a 10th baby. This 10th baby, which is certainly very rare in Europe, but relatively common in Africa. But in this region, the 10th baby from a single woman will be considered as cursed, which means that it will never occupy high responsibilities in the village. It will not be involved in village decision-making processes unless this ritual is observed with the skirt of the white-tailed colobus, which means that if the white-tailed colobus is driven to extinction, women have to be careful. And agriculture and fisheries, as I said, are important, the most important economic activities, and they are all rainfall dependent. And it is clearly demonstrated that rainfall also depends on forest cover. To sum up, research feeds actions and vice versa, and this has been modeled in this graph. In the middle of the graph, you have the system. The system is the conservation of the Tanwe forest. In yellow, you have the different types of studies that you can conduct on the system. And in, I would say, blue, you can find the outputs of these research activities. And in green, you have the outcomes. So I want to comment all these things. Let's take this case, the study of ecosystem services. When you study the ecosystem services of the forest, you have strong arguments to raise awareness. And if you have strong argument to raise awareness, you may change behavior. You may change behavior, and this change of behavior will result in the conservation of the Tanwe A forest. You can also, through awareness raising, obtain social mobilization, which will in turn lead to change of behavior, which will in turn lead to the conservation of the system. Let's take the case of the study of sacred relationships to nature. We did that, and by doing that, people felt that we respected their tradition, we respected their values. And when this is the case, you foster social mobilization. And when you foster social mobilization, you lead to a change of behavior, a change of attitude towards the forest, which leads to the conservation of the system. So this is what we've been doing, and it's an iterative process since 2006. And this is the secret of the success of our project. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I would like to acknowledge all the partners, past partners and current partners, and I would like to thank every one of you for your kind intention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Inza, for that brilliant talk. And we're sorry you can't be here with us, but it's great to hear about your research, and it's so important. And I think many of us in the lab are now thinking about, as scientists, how we can think about conservation too. So linking scientific research and interdisciplinary research is, as your talk has shown, is just so important. And I think it's fantastic of those who work in other parts in Africa, in our lab, and other colleagues, about this link between economy and ecology and culture, and also sort of engaging with communities. And so I think it's a really fantastic talk, and it would be great to go through some questions that we've had from YouTube, and I've got a long list here. So if that's okay, I think we're going to go through some of the questions in the next 10-15 minutes or so. So just to kick things off, we're going to start with projects in Africa and Côte d'Ivoire and cooperation. So I think you've touched on this a little bit, but sort of what role can cooperation between countries such as Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana play in protecting forests like the Tanoehi forest, like you've been talking about? And are there other areas which you think are going to start to implement the strategies you've been talking about?
Yes, thank you. As I said, this forest is very close to Ghana, and you may observe threats coming from Ghana, as well as you may also observe people going from Côte d'Ivoire to threaten some Ghanaian forest areas. So for this reason, it is very important that we develop synergies with Ghanaian stakeholders. Fortunately, we have one joint partner, which is WAPCA, West African Primate Conservation Action. They are based in Ghana, and we represent them in Côte d'Ivoire. So this has enabled to develop, I would say, this synergy, at least at community level. These communities are the same people. So they speak the same language and so on. They have the same traditions and so on. Of note is that somebody can be, for instance, working in Côte d'Ivoire, do all his career, and when he gets retired, he can go back to Ghana and become a chief of a village, and vice versa. That's to demonstrate that these are the same people. So it was relatively easily to develop synergy between them. This goes through organizing joint awareness raising campaign, organizing joint surveillance, and organizing joint capacity building, also organizing exchanges between the two villages, the two countries. So we send some of our community members to do surveys in Ghana and vice versa. They come to participate in our surveys when possible. This has been, I would say, stopped by COVID-19 situation, because since COVID-19, the border between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana has been closed. So officially, we cannot organize this thing. Officially, communities know that they can.
So I mean, we've all felt the impact of COVID-19 as scientists. I mean, a lot of us haven't been in the field, but just going on that question, conservation is, is it a different field now the COVID-19 pandemic has sort of come, and how has it changed in our approach moving forward in conservation?
Yeah, this pandemic has affected the project, and we try to adapt to this new situation. So one big change was that I would say exchanges between our stakeholders and Ghanaian stakeholders were no more possible officially. The other impact was economic, because most economic transaction would be made between the two countries. Ivorians would use to sell their products in Ghana and vice versa. But with the closure of the border, so poverty has kind of increased in the area. So it made it very difficult to talk about conservation. Fortunately, we received support from SOS Rapid Grants to face this new situation. And this enabled us to revitalize community organization, to raise awareness, to find new markets, so new incentive for our community members. So this is what has changed. And other thing that have changed, we changed our priorities. Yeah, before I would say COVID-19, our priorities would be in fostering this synergy between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. But after that, as we were not alone, we focused more on local capacity building. We focus more on the search for important species like Miss Wardron's red colobus. We focus on developing new tools, technologies to improve our efficiency in the field.
Yeah, I think as you've mentioned, this sort of pandemic has been such an impact both on organisations, but also reaching out to the communities, engaging and raising public awareness. And so, when you're reaching out communities and to try and build this sense of, this culture around conservation, what are the challenges that you've really faced in trying to build that sort of sense of culture in these communities? What are the barriers that are preventing it?
Yeah, if you want to do awareness raising, you don't have to believe that these communities, I would say, do not understand the importance of conserving species or conserving the forest. Generally, they do understand that, but they would feel that they don't have a choice. They need to survive. So you need to focus on these things. If their sources of income are jeopardized, then your conservation effort will fail. It is really important to accompany local communities in terms of local development. This is why it's been problematic when the border with Ghana was closed. It was problematic, and we needed to find new markets for the product that we've been encouraging the communities to produce. They produce, for instance, vegetables, and there's no market for it. They produce cassava, no market for it. This is problematic. What can you tell them? How can you change their behavior? So we've worked on this, and fortunately it worked. It also boosted their commitment for conservation.
Again, it really reminds me of colleagues who work in Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique, where they've done similar things like you're saying, finding new markets like coffee growing and honey that seem to sort of generate as economic need. But just moving on that point, we also have a question here about poaching and that sort of being a market in itself. And so the question is, what are the main drivers of poaching? Who are the consumers, local and urban, in the populations? And sort of how is poaching, what are the implications for conservation action plans moving forward?
Yeah, the main drivers of poaching are, I would say, poverty and the lack of access to other sources of protein. In the rural areas, it is difficult to access to the classical sources of protein. It's much easier for them to access to wild meat as compared to other, I would say, meat. This is very important. Fortunately, in our region, fisheries are very important as a source of protein. So it's relatively easy to make people understand that they don't actually need to continue to kill wildlife. And the other driver is, I would say, lack of awareness. Lack of awareness. These people did not know that the monkeys that their forest house are the most, I would say, interesting monkey species of West Africa, the most endangered monkey species of West Africa. But once they learned that, it stimulated a kind of feeling of pride among them. They were proud to become the guardians of Miss Wadron Rescorobis, the guardians of Rollowy Gwinon, something that nobody would have the opportunity to do in the world except them. This feeling of pride has also been a big, important driver to stop hunting in the region.
And yeah, just on that note, like I think in your talk, the importance of scientific research, I'm assuming that sort of comes into it as a big factor. And so, I know that you have your roots as a behavioral ecologist and behavior. And I was wondering whether you've actually sort of looked at in some of these areas that you've talked about today, how the behavior of the primate species themselves has been impacted in these fragmented areas.
The fact is that it's relatively difficult to study primate behavior in these forests. It's not like in the Thai forest that you can practice easily. You can follow the monkeys daily. This is a swampy forest. While the monkeys can move easily in the canopy, you cannot follow them. So the only thing that we did to have, I would say, some information about their ecology was through camera trapping. So we've been using camera trapping in the canopy in different areas of the forest, and we have nice images of these primates, the sympathetic species, and some of their behaviors and so on. Have their behavior been impacted, for instance, by poaching? Yes, of course, we can hypothesize that. And you can even feel that from time to time. When you enter the forest, for instance, and you spend 1 day, 2 days, and you don't hear calls of Rollowy Gwinon, you may worry. And this happened when hunting pressure increased during a certain period. When we enter the forest in this period, you don't hear calls of these monkeys. Otherwise, they are noisy. They are noisy, you can see them everywhere. So this is a sign that they adjust their behavior to the poaching intensity. And when we observe things like this, we intensify surveys, and in the following weeks, you can observe again a change of behavior that behave more naturally. They are more noisy and so on.
And I guess a big component of that is that you have these very fragmented pockets of forests, and it's also about building the sort of environment around those species. So in your projects, has reforestation been sort of a key component of that? I know that for the field site in Bosu where I work, that the green corridor, sort of making sure there's connectivity, has been a long-term project, and I was wondering whether that's the case with your project.
I would say not yet, unfortunately not yet, because indeed we have chainsaw mining. We don't have any logging in the forest. We managed to stop the logging initiative in 2006, but since then we have only chainsaw mining by illegal, I would say, which is an illegal activity. And the impact of this is still residual. if we make an estimate of the area that have been impacted, for us it's not more than 5 hectares, over 12,000 hectares. So this impact of chainsaw mining is very, very small. I don't remember every other aspect of the question. Yeah, to say that there was no need to do reforestation so far. But at the periphery, we've been promoting agroforestry, because it is very important to increase the resilience of plantation at the periphery, to multiply the sources of income for local communities at the periphery, so that with demographic growth, they don't become, I would say, an increased threat to the forest. They don't be forced to go to the forest for non-timber forest products or even for timber forest products. This is very important. So we've been encouraging agroforestry at the periphery. Every year, we plant about 20,000 seedlings in farmlands at the periphery. Now we are changing paradigms. We want to create botanical gardens in each village, and even, I would say, small village forests in all these areas, so that they have the local resources and they are not forced to go inside the town forest in the future.
So it's building on economic need and biodiversity as well. And I guess, yeah, I think what you're saying is the bottom-up approach from the communities as well to be central in that role. We have a question, and I think you mentioned it a little bit about the logging. It's quite interesting. Rather than the sort of community bottom-up effects, we've got a question here that people are curious about the actions of industrial activities like palm oil, like mining. Like, do you anticipate new pressures from these industries? Are they going to grow? Are they going to cause more pressures in sort of reforesting and building these areas?
I hope that oil palm will not become a problem anymore after the fight that we made in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
We hope so. But the current threat that is a bit problematic is mining at the periphery. This can be occurring even in Ghana, for instance. Recently, there was a mining initiative in Ghana, and WAPA Ghana tried to fight against it. We had such, I would say, attempts very close to the Tamil forest. We managed to fight against this 2 years ago or even last year. But these people have not abandoned. They can try to redevelop their arguments, or they don't even sometimes need to operate legally. If this is illegal, we have to find a ways to fight against. If this is legal and we are vigilant enough to be there when they do the environmental, I would say, assessment, environmental impact assessment, we can voice the communities. We can also raise the voice of the communities in these places to stop projects when they want to operate legally. But if we want to operate illegally, we also have to find a means to stop them.
And there's actually a question which fits beautifully into that, in that sort of activism against these companies is a sort of really important component. You know, from your experience, you know, is activism in these areas dangerous? Do companies retaliate?
Say it again.
So we've got a question about when in these areas, sort of we're promoting activism against companies, and you've emphasized it's important we have sort of legal ways of objecting to these big companies. But we have a question here from someone saying that do companies hit back? Is it quite dangerous to protest against some of these big companies in these areas? Is there a fear of local people for standing up for their sort of forest?
Yes, of course, it can be dangerous to do activism, but the secret is to show right in the beginning that it's not a matter of one person. It's not a matter of one institution. You have to show that you are several institutions, several persons involved in this, several leaders playing an important role. If something happens to one leader, other leaders will be continuing the fight. If one institution is corrupted, the other ones will not be corrupted and will continue the fight. You have to show that right in the beginning, never go alone. Never go alone. Go, I would say, together with all stakeholders that share your vision and so on. So whenever we wanted to enter into activism, we presented at least 5 different NGOs from Cote-d'Ivoire, 2 from international. We presented, I would say, other institutions. We alerted the National Assembly, even different ministers and so on. And when you proceed like this, you are not a problem, but you know that it's an entire system that is behind you.
I think, yeah, it's inspiring to hear those words and sort of thinking about the future of conservation. Just to wrap things up, because we've had over 50 minutes of questions now, but just very quickly, what do you think is the biggest challenge we face in the next 50, 100 years? And what brings you hope? What idea or innovation brings you hope and excitement for the future?
Now, the biggest challenge in the future would be an external factor. How can we be sure of the coherence of policies in general in Cote d'Ivoire? Because we observe from time to time some contradiction. How can you understand that, for instance, schools are built inside protected areas, and that government sends, I would say, teachers in these schools inside protected areas? These are things that we observed in the past. Currently, or before currently, in the past, agriculture used to be, I would say, the locomotive of the development in Cote d'Ivoire. And this has resulted in deforestation, massive deforestation in the country. Currently, they're focusing on mining. And even the World Bank is now supporting Africa to map its, I would say, resources underground. So, which means that these African countries, including Cote d'Ivoire, will be focusing on mining, which can, I would say, hardly be compatible with conservation. Can we conservationists be strong enough to raise attention where it is needed, to raise the attention of these politics so that they don't do, I would say, non-reversible things? If we lose a forest like the Tanway forest with its unique resources, this will be a big loss to the country. And we're not talking about the luxury. We are talking about the economic realities of communities, of the neighboring communities. I said fisheries, agriculture are the most important economic activities of thousands of people around. And this will depend on the maintenance of the Tanway forest. The ecosystem services that the forest provides, whether for culture, construction, access to medicinal plants and so on, we lose all these things. And I don't think that these things can be offered by an oil palm industry or a mining company. I don't think they can offer this in a sustainable manner. So this is what we've been discussing with community members. And I would say they understood this before engaging with us, and we are confident that this engagement will be over the long term.
Well, thank you so much, Inza, for a fantastic talk, really inspiring talk. That is for everyone in the lab. We just thank you because conservation, it's going to be so critical moving forward in years ahead. And so, just to wrap up and just say that thank you everyone for watching and coming and seeing Inza's talk. If you have any other questions, please get in touch with him. But I'm just going to wrap up by saying that please join us next week on the 8th of February at 3 p.m. for another talk by our very own Elodie Freeman on experiencing the natural world, synthesizing art and science in the study of primates. So we look forward to seeing you then. But for now, thank you, Inza, and we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.